The most definitive sign that an avoidant truly loves you is when they override their strongest instinct, the urge to flee from emotional intensity, and instead choose to stay present during your most difficult, vulnerable, and emotionally overwhelming moments. For avoidants, emotional storms feel like threats to their nervous system, triggering every defensive mechanism they've developed to protect themselves from feeling suffocated or consumed by others' feelings. When you're crying, angry, anxious, or going through any form of emotional crisis, the avoidant's natural response is to feel overwhelmed and create distance until the emotional weather passes. They've learned that other people's big feelings can destabilize their own emotional equilibrium, making them feel responsible for fixing something they don't understand how to repair. Their typical strategy is disappearance, physical or emotional, until you've regulated yourself. But when an avoidant truly loves you, they fight against this hardwired response and force themselves to remain present, even when your emotions trigger their deepest fears about emotional engulfment. They may not know how to comfort you perfectly, they may feel awkward or uncertain about what to say, but they don't leave. They sit with you in your pain because losing you feels worse than enduring their own discomfort. This staying power during emotional intensity is extraordinary for avoidants because it requires them to tolerate the exact situation they've spent their lives learning to avoid. They're choosing your need for support over their need for emotional safety. They're prioritizing the relationship over their individual comfort. They're proving that you matter more to them than their own defensive patterns. The love is evident not just in their presence, but in their effort to be helpful despite their limitations. They might bring you tissues, make you tea, or simply sit quietly nearby while you process. They're not trying to fix your emotions or rush you through them. They're just ensuring you don't have to face difficult moments alone. This represents a fundamental shift in their priorities from self-protection to partnership. When an avoidant stays present during your emotional storms, they're essentially saying, "Your well-being matters more to me than my own comfort," without having to use those vulnerable words. They're demonstrating love through the ultimate sacrifice for someone with their attachment style, giving up their emotional safety to provide yours. They integrate you into their private world and future planning. Avoidants are notorious for compartmentalizing their lives, keeping relationships separate from family, friends, work, and personal interests. They maintain strict boundaries between different areas of their existence as a way of protecting their autonomy and ensuring that no single person or relationship becomes too central to their identity. Breaking down these compartments represents one of the most significant expressions of love an avoidant can offer. When an avoidant truly loves you, they begin voluntarily dismantling the walls between different parts of their life. They invite you to meet their family, not because you've pressured them or because it's expected, but because they want the people who matter to them to know the person who has become most important. They introduce you to their close friends, include you in their social circles, and allow you to see how they interact in different contexts. This integration extends beyond social connections to their personal interests and private spaces. They share hobbies they typically pursue alone, invite you into their living space without feeling invaded, and allow you to witness their routines and habits without performing or hiding aspects of their personality. They're essentially saying, "I trust you enough to see all of me, not just the version I present publicly." Perhaps most significantly, they begin making future plans that naturally include your presence. This isn't about grand romantic gestures or pressure to commit. It's about organic inclusion in their vision of their own life. They mention trips they'd like to take with you, discuss career decisions with consideration for how they might affect your relationship, or make plans that assume your continued presence in their world. This future planning is revolutionary for avoidance because it requires them to acknowledge that you've become essential to their happiness and life satisfaction. They're admitting through their actions that their future looks better with you in it than without you. They're choosing to build their life around a partnership, rather than maintaining the flexibility to escape at any moment. The integration of you into their private world and future plans represents the avoidant's ultimate expression of trust and commitment. They're showing you parts of themselves they typically keep hidden, and they're betting their future happiness on your continued presence in their life. They become vulnerable about their fears and attachment wounds. The most sacred expression of avoidant love is when they begin sharing the fears, wounds, and insecurities they typically keep buried beneath layers of defensive behavior. Avoidants have learned that vulnerability leads to pain, that showing weakness invites rejection, and that revealing their authentic selves results in abandonment. When they choose to be vulnerable with you, they're taking the ultimate emotional risk. This vulnerability doesn't usually emerge as dramatic confessions or therapeutic breakthroughs. Instead, it appears in small moments of authentic sharing. Admitting they're scared about a situation they're facing, acknowledging their struggles with intimacy, or sharing stories about their childhood that explain their current defensive patterns. Each moment of openness represents enormous courage for someone who has learned to equate emotional exposure with danger. The avoidant might tell you about their fear of being controlled or consumed in relationships, their terror of abandonment disguised as indifference, or their deep-seated belief that they're fundamentally unlovable. They share not because they expect you to fix these wounds, but because they trust you enough to witness their authentic struggles without judgment or attempts to change them. This vulnerability often emerges when the avoidant realizes that hiding their fears is actually damaging the relationship they want to protect. They begin to understand that their defensive behaviors, designed to keep them safe, are actually creating the very rejection and abandonment they are trying to avoid. Love motivates them to risk being known rather than continuing to risk being left for reasons they won't explain. When avoidants share their attachment wounds with you, they're essentially handing you a roadmap to their deepest vulnerabilities. They're trusting you with information that could be used to hurt them profoundly, betting that your love is strong enough and safe enough to handle their authentic truth. This level of trust represents the deepest intimacy an avoidant can offer. The sharing of fears and wounds also represents the avoidant's recognition that you're someone worth growing for. They're not just revealing their damage, they're acknowledging their desire to heal and their trust that you can be part of that healing process. They're choosing growth over safety, intimacy over isolation, love over fear. They choose you over their need for control and independence. Avoidants prize their autonomy above almost everything else, believing that independence equals safety and that needing others makes them vulnerable to disappointment and pain. When they truly love someone, they begin making choices that prioritize the relationship over their individual control, demonstrating that you've become more important than their defensive patterns. This shift appears in daily decisions where they consider your needs and preferences rather than making unilateral choices. They consult you about plans that affect you both, adjust their schedules to accommodate shared time, and make compromises that would have felt suffocating in previous relationships. They're essentially choosing partnership over complete autonomy. The avoidant starts including you in decision-making processes they typically handle alone. They ask for your opinion about job opportunities, living situations, or major life changes. They want your input not because they're incapable of deciding independently, but because your perspective has become valuable to them, and they want to make choices that work for both of you. Perhaps most significantly, they begin accepting help and support from you, which goes against their deeply ingrained belief that self-sufficiency equals strength. They allow you to take care of them when they're sick, provide emotional support during difficult times, or assist with challenges they would normally handle alone. This acceptance of interdependence represents a fundamental shift in their relationship philosophy. The avoidant also starts making sacrifices for your happiness that would have been unthinkable earlier in their emotional development. They attend social events they'd normally avoid because they matter to you. They engage in relationship discussions they typically deflect because they know communication is important to you. They participate in traditions or activities that aren't their preference because making you happy has become a priority. This choice of partnership over independence is visible in how they handle conflicts and disagreements. Instead of withdrawing or ending conversations when things get emotionally charged, they stay engaged and work toward resolution. They choose the discomfort of working through problems together over the familiar comfort of handling everything alone. When an avoidant consistently chooses you over their need for complete control and independence, they're demonstrating that love has become more important to them than fear. They're showing that your relationship has evolved from being a threat to their autonomy to being a source of strength and happiness worth making sacrifices to preserve. They protect and defend you in your absence. One of the most telling signs of genuine avoidant love is when they become protective of your reputation, feelings, and interests when you're not present to protect yourself. Avoidants typically prefer to remain neutral in conflicts and avoid getting emotionally involved in other people's drama, but love motivates them to become your advocate and defender. This protection manifests as correcting misconceptions about you in conversations, redirecting criticism away from you in group settings, and ensuring that others see your positive qualities rather than focusing on any perceived flaws. They can't remain neutral when someone speaks poorly of you because your well-being and reputation have become personally important to them. The avoidant defends you not to earn your gratitude or because they feel obligated, but because attacks on you feel like attacks on something precious to them. They've invested so much emotion in you that protecting you becomes an extension of protecting themselves. Your dignity and happiness matter enough to them that they're willing to risk social discomfort to ensure you're treated fairly. This protective behavior is particularly significant because it requires the avoidant to take emotional risks they normally avoid. By defending you, they're revealing their investment in your well-being and potentially damaging other relationships to preserve yours. They're showing that you've become their priority in ways that override their usual preference for staying uninvolved. Their protection extends beyond just defending against criticism to actively promoting your positive qualities in social situations. They highlight your accomplishments, share stories that showcase your character, and make sure others recognize your value. They become your unofficial public relations manager because they're genuinely proud to be associated with you. When avoidants consistently protect and defend you in your absence, they're demonstrating that your well-being has become integrated into their own sense of well-being. They can't separate your happiness from theirs, your reputation from theirs, your pain from theirs. This level of emotional integration represents the deepest form of attachment an avoidant can experience. They fight for the relationship instead of fighting against it. The ultimate expression of avoidant love is when they begin fighting for the relationship rather than fighting against it. Throughout most of their romantic history, avoidants have fought against connection, commitment, and intimacy as threats to their safety and autonomy. When they truly love someone, this energy redirects toward preserving and strengthening the relationship rather than escaping from it. This shift becomes evident during conflicts and difficult periods where the avoidant's usual response would be to withdraw, create distance, or end the relationship to restore their emotional equilibrium. Instead, they stay engaged, work toward solutions, and invest effort in repairing damage, rather than using problems as excuses to escape. The avoidant begins viewing relationship challenges as problems to solve together, rather than evidence that relationships are too difficult or demanding. They participate in difficult conversations they would normally avoid, seek help when communication breaks down, and make genuine efforts to understand and meet your emotional needs, rather than dismissing them as excessive or unreasonable. This fighting for the relationship is visible in their willingness to examine and change their own patterns, rather than expecting you to accommodate their limitations indefinitely. They seek therapy, read about attachment styles, or engage in other forms of personal growth work because they recognize that their defensive behaviors are damaging something they want to preserve. When faced with the possibility of losing you, the avoidant who truly loves you will override their instinct to let you go and instead fight to keep you. They'll have conversations they've been avoiding, make commitments they've been resisting, and take emotional risks they've been preventing because preserving the relationship becomes more important than protecting themselves. This shift from fighting against the relationship to fighting for it represents the avoidant's recognition that what you've built together is worth the vulnerability and effort that love requires. They've moved beyond seeing you as a threat to their independence to seeing you as a partner worth growing and changing for. This transformation from resistance to investment is the clearest indicator that an avoidant has moved from caring about you to truly loving you in ways that motivate real change and genuine commitment.